The Reserve Bank initiated last year a project called Project Acacia, and that's specifically looking at ways that tokenization can be utilized within financial markets infrastructure. From the big banks down to smaller fintechs that pose use cases within this tokenization theme. 24 use cases, 19 of which will be live, real money, live pilot projects, and 5 other proofs of concept. We believe that stablecoins will only exist really in public infrastructure, public networks. Very little utility of a stablecoin in a private network. And so I approached them maybe 6 months ago and said, would you consider issuing on to Hedera? So now we're seeing the likes of Equity Labs doing provenance of war zone photography and the like, becoming a business for verifiable compute, which NVIDIA and Intel were then kind of interested in incorporating into their firmware. And now Accenture, one of the world's biggest technology consulting businesses, is a go-to-market partner. It's the gold standard of decentralized network security, so that you just don't get better than that.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the All in Crypto podcast. I am your host, Rupert, and today I am delighted to be joined by a familiar face. We have Rob Allen, the head of Future Payments, with us once again to talk to us about some exceptionally interesting topics. Welcome on board, Rob. How are you?
Hey, Rupert. Yeah, I'm very good. Very good. Thank you. It's pretty chilly down here in Sydney at the moment, but delighted to be on the show today.
It's always a pleasure to have you back. We really love connecting with you and catching up. And I think this is going to be the first time that me and you have spoke about Project Acacia. Some of the viewers may not be familiar with Project Acacia. Maybe we could just start off with an overview and then we'll get into some of the updates.
Yeah, of course. So for those of you who don't know, I work with Australian Payments Plus. Australian Payments Plus is the payments operator for the payment schemes in Australia. So basically, we run all the real-time payments, the FPOS card payments, bill payments infrastructure. And one of our key stakeholders, obviously, is the Reserve Bank of Australia, Australia's central bank. So 2 years ago, the Reserve Bank ran a CBDC pilot, which was pretty successful. They looked at ways that CBDCs could be integrated by financial ecosystem participants, and it resulted in a report which is in the public domain. Really, good reading. And one of the things that was the outcome of that previous pilot was that there should be more experimentation, more similar activity within the financial services ecosystem in Australia to look at ways that digital finance and the innovation around digital finance can drive the digital economy in Australia. And so in partnership with an organization called the Digital Finance Cooperative Research Centre, the DFCRC, which has been set up to support these sorts of initiatives, the Reserve Bank initiated last year a project called Project Acacia. And that's specifically looking at ways that tokenization can be utilized within financial markets infrastructure. Big, top end of town institutional use cases. Not necessarily CBDCs, but real world assets that have been tokenized. And they put forward a consultation paper at the end of last year that posited 5 different settlement models that could be used for the settlement of the acquisition of tokenized assets, whether it be real estate or securities or bonds, carbon credits, all sorts of those real world asset use cases. But once tokenized, how could they be acquired and settled within financial market infrastructure? So 2025 has been set up as the year of Project Acacia. There was many submissions. So that basically the way that it's run was to have the industry submit use cases and responses to the requests for information. And then there was a period of deliberation and curation, and trying to bring these projects together to align them to get the best outcomes for the project. And about a month ago, early July actually, there was all the submissions were announced, and there are 14 lead participants across the industry, from the big banks down to smaller fintechs, that have proposed use cases within this tokenization theme. And of those 14 lead entities, there are 24 use cases, 19 of which will be live, so real money, live pilot projects, and 5 other proofs of concept. So it's amazing that this has been delivered so quickly. It's got a lot of engagement from the industry. And Australian Payments Plus, we weren't part of the previous pilot, the CBDC pilot, but given the amount of work that we've been doing, looking at ways that the payments systems will change in the future. And working on infrastructure for supporting of that future, where stable coins proliferate and deposit tokens, and maybe even yield bearing tokenized money market funds. All of these new forms of digital money will need rails on which to not only run, because those are the blockchains, but interoperate, and how do the market participants use them. So that's where we fit in. It's not the vertical use cases, it's the kind of horizontal infrastructure that sits underneath all of this. And we were asked to submit project proposals, and we did, and we got our 3 all through. So careful what you wish for. We've got a lot of work ahead of us for the next 6 months to land all of this work. But I'm delighted that we've got a seat at the table, and now we're and a voice to participate.
Wow, well, an absolutely massive congratulations. It seems like everybody that I speak to, certainly within the Hedera sort of ecosystem, and you do far more than that, has a very busy time ahead of them. And I think that's a really good sign, right? Certainly you guys have, like you said, be careful what you wish for. I mean, this is absolutely huge. I think what we're witnessing more broadly is a kind of revolution or evolution, depending on how you want to put it, of financial systems. And I think really one of the enabling things is distributed ledger technology. And one thing, as a massive fan of the Hedera Hashgraph distributed ledger, that I was over the moon to see was on the press release that came out on the 10th of July, where they really gave an update on all of this. One of the first, or it's actually the first sort of public permission DLT that was mentioned, was Hedera. What's kind of Hedera's role in all of this?
So this is not just the Hedera show. I mean, the Reserve Bank have been very careful to be technology agnostic, and it's the projects that bring their choice of technology within this overall program. But Australian Payments Plus have been a Hedera governing council member for 4 years now. We've been quite quiet, to be fair, but that's largely because most of what we've been doing is in stealth, and running a number of proofs of concept, kind of looking at ways where we might find fit for this technology, both within our operations, but also, like I said, the future of payment schemes, where that might lead us. And so, we had technology available to us that we could submit as part of this this RFI process. And Yeah, there are three main use cases that we've proposed, and I'll answer your question about Hedera, within the context of those. So, I mean, the first is really just this is a proof of concept. It's almost a desktop assessment, but it's looking at ways and impacts and consequences of the introduction of stablecoins into the Australian payment system. So we have a faster payment system. UK call it faster payments. We call it MPP, the new payments platform, and it's real-time account-to-account payments. But what if in the future we have an extension to that payment system where I can take a stablecoin and pay it directly into your bank account? What are the impacts on both the technology and the rules that the scheme members abide by in a world where that becomes real? And many of us believe that it's actually going to become real sooner rather than later, with the Genius Act and everything else that's happening in the world. So that's not so much of a Hedera use case. We're looking at building a tech proof of concept beside that. We've implemented proofs of concept using the Hedera Stablecoin Studio, which is a very easy way to integrate in any application, actually, stablecoin functionality. And we've done it a number of times. So, tech proof of concept using stablecoins generated, using the Stablecoin Studio will be the way that we would do that. But it's more about what are the flows required to integrate, a stable coin or a deposit token or some form of digital money directly into a bank account. So that's one thing. But the two other projects are kind of far more interesting for us, because we need to take them into a pilot state, so a production pilot with real money.
Wow.
And the first is a token interchange. So imagine a stablecoin for stablecoin swap as infrastructure. So you're red bank, I'm blue bank. Your customer wants to pay money into my account, and I only want blue coins, but they've only got red coins. So how does that happen within a regulated framework such as a scheme? So we're doing that, and we believe that stablecoins will only exist really in public infrastructure, so on public networks. There's very little utility of a stablecoin on a private network. In fact, by definition, it isn't really a stablecoin, although some people argue a different case. So because we have this stablecoin and studio stack, because we've got experience in that, but also because we can't dictate what future members, what chains future members might issue onto. We have an architecture which includes bridging from Ethereum-like chains, layer 2s or EVM chains, and Hedera as well. So there's this kind of token interchange with a bridge that allows red coin to blue coin kind of transparent swapping, which as a core capability is very useful. I mean, it's given us the opportunity to look at future payment schemes that might wrap around that. What rules are required for red to blue swap? What happens if blue is a stable coin and red is a deposit token? What happens if a different coin is backed by a tier 2 bank with a lower credit rating than a tier 1 bank issued coin? So all of these rules are the far more important things that we need to look at rather than just the technology. And in addition to that, we were asked by the Reserve Bank whether we would need a CBDC issued within our use case. And there is a feature within what we've got that collateralizes stablecoins. So we've integrated a CBDC aspect that collateralizes the liquidity or some of the liquidity on this token interchange. And because the Reserve Bank wanted to only issue CBDCs, wholesale CBDCs, into private networks, we luckily had the Hedera Hashsphere team stand up a Hashsphere for the CBDC. So we've now got an architecture which actually synchronizes the private network with the public network, and that's a really interesting innovation that we're currently working on as well. So when the Reserve Bank announced that one of the four CBDC networks would be a private Hedera instance, that was for us. And the third use case is actually more aligned with the outcomes, the expected outcomes of Project Acacia, which is institutional and wholesale tokenization, and it's a settlement coordinator. So how do you do DVP, or how do DVP style marketplaces and platforms affect settlement of digital money for digital asset cross chain? So that's an orchestration layer that we're building on top of the token interchange, and also including other services like digital identity and proofs of reserve and fraud management and all the things that you would need within a future payment scheme. So we're kind of testing lots of different angles within that particular use case.
It sounds like
Sorry,
you've got your
there's a
work.
lot there.
No, I was going to say, it sounds like you've got your work cut out for you indeed. I mean, really be careful what you wish for, but this is huge. And I think this is another massive green light in regards to the kind of traditional legacy financial system. A central bank, in this case, actually looking to use and implement, or at least trialing the implementation of distributed ledger technology to revolutionize their financial system. I mean, it's me and you have been in crypto for a hell of a long time to kind of still be maybe pinching ourselves right now in regards to, is this reality? Have we really ended up here from maybe when we got into the space? I think we had an idea perhaps that it was going to be as big as it is, but I mean, we're here now, right?
Yeah, but I mean, it still feels very slow to me.
Yeah.
And the Australian, we're never on the bleeding edge, and we don't have the venture capital really to drive innovation fast. But we do like to be fast followers, and the Reserve Bank, has set up a program which is quite unique in the world, I think, and need to be
Yes.
applauded for it. I've taken a lot of notes from Project Meridian, which was the BIS and Bank of England project, I think, and have learned lessons from that, and are looking at ways, to implement it or make it relevant to the Australian economy as well. So yeah, it feels very slow, but at the same time, yes, I pinch myself that sometimes that we are where we are, and ride the wave. There's plenty of good news stories around the crypto and Web3 space at the moment, and just happy to be involved within it.
Yeah, and you are involved indeed, doing an absolutely amazing job, and a massive congratulations again. It is very interesting, everything that's going on right now. The Reserve Bank of Australia, the BOE, the Bank of England, they're obviously conducting pilots with distributed ledgers, the ECB. Everybody is moving towards embracing this technology, and I think that's because of it. Larry Fink, in his letter to investors, kind of said the financial system at the moment works very much like routing emails through the post office. And I think that's quite funny, but also quite true in many cases. I think when you kind of look into how, and you'll have a far better understanding on this than most, when you look at how kind of finance is done and things like this, it's very much kind of like a switchboard system at the moment. And I think with these distributed ledgers, what you can do is essentially unify them and bring them all into, hopefully eventually, an interconnectable space where there's no need for that sort of fragmentation. We talk about crypto being siloed. Actually, the financial system is rather siloed, right?
For sure,
At the moment.
yeah, and built in that way specifically, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think with these public, you mentioned there about public versus private. It's quite obvious to me. I mean, you are going to have private networks, of course. There's going to need to be an interchange ability or an interconnectability with public ones. You mentioned the
Yep.
public ones went out. Why do you think public over private for these broad kind of use cases like stablecoins? Because I always get that question. Why wouldn't these big institutions just, use their own private networks? Well, then how can you enable the global reach, right? They tried that with the internet, and then they had to go, okay, let's make this public so it can get that reach.
Absolutely. We're probably old enough to remember intranets and the walled garden networks that preceded them. gardens wither and die in walled gardens. You know, you need the bridges, you need the interoperability, you need the scale, the liquidity to flow through these open networks in order to to be both usable to for innovation to flourish, and also to for mass scale. It won't work in any other way. I mean, you have to. I think networks have to go through that step. You've seen it with mobile networks. We've seen it with payments networks. Most networks start in a proprietary form, and then either go open standards, and everyone else sort of takes the advantage of the early investment, or standards form around interoperability. So the conduits and the pipes between these networks need to be large enough to handle the scale. And that's where we are with DLT. It's a cliche now, hearing people say there won't be one chain to rule them all. And I even heard a Swiss banker in Zurich, say this on stage at a Swift conference recently. So I'll never say it again, having heard a senior Swiss banker use the term, but it's true, right? I mean, we've gone past. I think the technology has been proven. DLT in general. Clearly, there are different variations of DLT, and some are better than others for different use cases. Some have the benefits of the early adoption and the liquidity that are within them, but the later ones learn the lessons and have broken the trilemma, or have found other ways like Hedera to scale without compromise. But they will exist. They'll continue to exist, and therefore the bridges, the interoperable solutions. It's the reason things like Layer 0 and Axelar and others are now kind of next generation bridges that are enabling these cross network utility to start to form.
Yeah, and I know me and you are big fans of Hedera. I think one thing I always think about is, once you figure out how to kind of connect the space and break down those walled gardens, then what you tend to find is that the network effects, that the people that were early, perhaps, you don't need to use them, because now it's all interconnected. And the ones that perhaps have the capabilities, like I think Hedera does, I think we'll start to eat away at that. And I think that's an exciting future that I think we're getting to. There was another announcement, and I know you're also familiar with this matter. The AUD Stablecoin has launched on Hedera. Now, this was last month. So this was in June. We've looked at, obviously, the most recent update from Project Acacia took place on the 10th of July. What's this all about? And then this might take us into a good conversation about different kinds of, stablecoins versus central bank money. What's this sort of AUD stablecoin all about, launching on Hedera?
So AUDD is just that. It's a stablecoin denominated by the Australian dollar. It's been around a few years now. It's actually a spin out of a payments company called Novati. I think they started on the Stellar chain and have issued on XRP and Ethereum, maybe a couple of others. The Australian Web3 space is quite small, so we all know each other pretty well. And I was looking for partners for Project Acacia, and I needed a stablecoin issuer that wasn't necessarily a bank to be part of our project. And so I approached them maybe 6 months ago and said, would you consider issuing on to Hedera, because that would make one of our legs easier. I need a native token issuer, and I'll need an Ethereum style issuer, and then I can demonstrate this interchange, cross issuer, cross chain, etc. And they agreed to do it. So not only that, I asked if they would use the Stablecoin Studio as well, because that gives us native HTS tokens, but also wrapped in a kind of a SOC 2 compliant smart contract, ERC20 smart contract wrapper. So you get a really good kind of tech stack implementing using the Stablecoin Studio, and it allows us to do atomic swaps, really, really cheaply and quickly. So that's what happened. So the announcement a month ago wasn't actually separate from the other Acacia announcements. It just preceded it, and if you join the dots, you kind of lead back to us. But they're a great partner to work with. I think there's a press release going out tomorrow about this, so I'm not kind
Fantastic.
of
That'll
jumping
be
the
out,
gun
I
at
think.
all.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably by the time this comes out. But they're not the only one, right? There's a handful of small startup issuers, and this is quite an interesting thing that we're seeing globally. People think of stablecoins, they think of USDC or USDT. They've got 99.9% of the market, and with the Genius Act, it's really kind of that's driving that re-dollarization as opposed to the de-dollarization that was the risk of under the previous administration. But there is quite a vibrant non-US dollar denominated stablecoin ecosystem. There's an organization called the Stablecoin Standard, which are guardians of the fact that stablecoins don't need to be USD. And there are lots of reasons why, local reasons why non-US dollar denominated stablecoins are useful. Obviously, they're easier to on-ramp and off-ramp into local currencies. You're not exposed to foreign exchange risk. They support local businesses. They are familiar to local people, which glues communities. It helps diasporas, sort of send money in their familiar currency, and lots of other reasons, that are some technical, some less so. So, we've got 3, maybe 4, depending on the day, smaller stablecoin issuers with Australian dollar denominations. We've also got a couple of banks that have issued stablecoins as well that are Australian dollar denominated. But every single one, really interestingly, every single one of them have targeted a different set of use cases. So one might target cross-border high value use cases, one might be institutional, one might be retail, one might just be stores of value because it's they like the idea, their customers like the idea of having these stable coins in their wallets. So there's no competition really between them yet at the use case level. I'm sure there's some at the fringes, but they've kind of found their own niche, which I find really interesting because it kind of supports my view that I've had for quite a long time, is that stablecoins aren't use cases in their own right. They're primitives that are used within use cases. The digital money isn't the use case. Money is a facilitator for use cases, and similarly digital money is a facilitator for digital use cases. And so stablecoins are the rails. They're the new rails, and we talk about payments rails. Well, that's what we're looking at. So it falls well within the AP Plus remit to actually determine how we use these new rails. What's the threat or the opportunity to us as a business that these new forms of money are starting to proliferate before it all comes over the top, right? Before this massive wave of US dollar stable coins kind of washes through our country, and there's nothing to stop merchants taking USDC as a form of currency. There's no regulation that prevents it. So and one would only expect their regulation to be the only way to prevent it, unless you nurture a local privately issued stablecoin and deposit token space, which is what the Australian Reserve Bank and the government have said that they will do. There's no In Australia, there's no real case for a retail CBDC. There's a case for wholesale CBDC in terms of efficiency and at the top end of town, but they expect privately issued digital money to fill that gap, and the industry is responding, which is super interesting. So having Hedera in that mix was essential for us, I think, because it makes a lot of the use cases a lot easier. And then, of course, you've got one network isn't the same as another. So a one layer one might be constrained by the trilemma, super slow, hard to scale, etc. And you might have a Hedera which is none of those things and will scale beautifully without almost taking a breath. So one is better for some use cases like micropayments or transactional Internet of Things, or even agentic commerce now. We're seeing some great use cases where AI agents can communicate with microtransactions at super, super low cost in real time. There's some great projects in the Hedera ecosystem that are focusing on AI use cases, because blockchains can't really get that low and touch those use cases. So where we see the overlap between AI and tokenization or stablecoins, Hedera really thrives. So that's one of the things I'm most excited about at the moment, seeing how those sorts of use cases start to flourish.
Yeah, I'm a believer as well that we're going to see more financial transactions or transactions taking place from machine to machine in the future than we will human to human.
For sure.
I think this is one thing that I love about Hedera as well, is it's just got its finger in so many different pies. It can do so much. I mean, and I always say this, there's so much happening on Hedera. Some entire projects base themselves off kind of one thing that Hedera is doing. It's doing it all. And, there's so much in what you said just there. I think one thing I want to draw on is the kind of stablecoin or currency innovation race. It almost maybe becomes a matter of national stability for a country to adopt this technology, perhaps to be able to compete with the likes of US dollar denominated stablecoins. I mean, stablecoins are a major unlock. When I go for a sports therapy massage, the guy's always cursing me for paying with my card, because he says, they take a couple of quid off me for doing this. And, with stablecoins, you could literally get rid of that.
For sure.
Partly, anyway.
Yeah,
and
totally.
I think that's very interesting, that where we are right now is really at the first innings. We see the US dollar denominated stablecoins dominate. Their governments are actively pushing this technology for a variety of reasons. Dollar dominance, also to introduce a purchaser to the treasury markets. You're going to have to see countries push back on that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, they get dollarized. Is that
Yep.
something that you think? I mean, surely nations are thinking about this and going, we need to adopt this or get cannibalized by it.
Yeah, I mean, and you're seeing news reports, missives coming out of Europe in particular. I mean, a lot of what Europe is doing is trying to stand up against the threat of of dollarization.
Yep.
I think most of the rest of the world has either already succumbed to it. There was a period in the last few years where blockchain was seen as the way of weaning those smaller nations off of their tie to the US dollar. But I think it's snapped back the other way now, and they didn't escape the gravitational pull quick enough. Of course, we've still got China and the Chinese, the Belt and Road initiatives and what they're doing with their blockchain services network, and they're not going to roll over and let the US have their way completely. So I think it'll play out really, really interestingly. Because digital yuan or digital renminbi is a thing as well. So and the indebted nations of the world to China that are tied into their Belt and Road initiatives will no doubt choose the alternative. So I think we've got a really interesting setup over the next few years. If
Yeah,
we
for
survive
sure.
the AGI kind of explosions that are going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I always think AI is such a vast topic. I do love that Hedera's almost enabling safe AI. I don't know if safe AI is the right word, but it's kind of coming up. Whenever I listen to early AI talks, one of the main things that they spoke about was there's an issue with provenance. Certainly, when you're talking about large language models and generative models, Hedera are very much solving that problem. I mean, I spoke to Dovu, and one of the interesting things was, and this is really how I think about Hedera, and it's really the innovation that distributed ledgers brought to us was this kind of trust layer. One of the issues with the carbon credit markets that Dovu highlighted was you couldn't trust it. There wasn't a kind of way to be able to verify this and trust it and track it. And with a DLT, you literally have that, and it enables a multi-billion dollar industry, potentially trillion-dollar industry in the future that's going to be very impactful. It's crazy how it's not crazy. It's the reality that this technology and technologies like Hedera, and there won't just be, to use that cliche, one chain to rule them all, are literally going to be so impactful in the future. One of the best sayings I ever heard about DLTs was if we had a DLT from the dawn of time, we'd have a very different history than what we have today because you couldn't have tampered with it.
Yeah,
And we know that it's often wrote by the
victors
victor.
weren't rewriting history. They'd be immutably their atrocities would be immutably logged. But the
Absolutely.
thing about Hedera is that it's one of the genius kind of innovations that Lehman Baird and Mance Harmon and Lehman in particular came up with was this kind of API layer approach. I mean, you've got the
Yep.
consensus layer, you've got the mainnet, you've got this directed acyclical graph, which is enabling you to do all these things, but you interact with it in a familiar way. And so then exposing things like the Hedera consensus service, the token service, and the smart contract service makes it easier to interact with. And what we've then seen in the subsequent few years is this kind of capability layer, this product layer being built on top. So things like the Stablecoin Studio, the Asset Tokenization Studio, and the Guardian for, you were talking about Dovu, but the whole the sustainable impact ecosystem that the foundation have seeded and are now growing is unique. It's so unique that you're able to build so many such a range of things. And so when AI became so massive last year, of course it's 10, 15 years in the making, but this big inflection point that we've seen in the last year, Hedera was perfectly well placed to for those use cases to be deployed onto Hedera. So now we're seeing the likes of Equity Labs that had been around for a while doing provenance of things like Warzone photography and the like, becoming a business for verifiable compute, which NVIDIA and Intel were then kind of interested in incorporating into their firmware. And now Accenture, one of the world's biggest technology consulting businesses, is a go-to-market partner for it. These sorts of things fly under the radar largely for Hedera because just of the nature of the noise in this space. But any one of these announcements would be, just massive news on any normal day. So, and that's just one thing, right? Remember, Prove AI came from Casper Labs because they chose, Hedera as a chain over their own chain because, better.
Yep.
And provenance really is and the provenance of the LLMs, the data that's going in, the output from the inference engines, is all necessary. Otherwise, we just blindly accept what ChatGPT is serving up, and we'll be in trouble very, very quickly. So these things are very, very important, and AI safety is something which is a core theme of of Hedera this year, along with tokenization, and sustainability continues to be one of our USPs. But those three pillars are becoming just so massive and a great fit for all the other use cases which can be built on Hedera.
It's
And
amazing,
I see them
isn't it?
all because I chair our network utilization committee, UseComp, for the governing council. So there are all these use cases coming through and being showcased, and we're discussing the respective architectures and taking notes from one another, and that's it's a great place to be. And AI, ESG, tokenization, stablecoins, there's such hot topics, and Hedera is right at the heart of all of them.
I think we're just so used to getting insanely bullish. I want to use that phrase, and just great news out of the Hedera ecosystem that it's kind of normal to us, right? Like you say, if it was on another chain, it would be oh my goodness, it'd be all over everywhere. But because this is just, I don't want to say another amazing announcement that Hedera has, it kind of gets like that, right? Doing so much, and the world runs on trust. If you look at why even the dollar was put as the world reserve currency, it's because it kind of had that trustability to it, the kind of watchdog element. I mean, I know we can get into other elements that the US had as a nation to enable that. But the world works on trust. Why do you put your money in a bank? Well, I know people in crypto kind of don't trust banks, but they kind of do in the sense that they use them. And if you brand their whole kind of images around trust, I think it's one of the reasons Hedera chose some of the largest institutions in the world. They're putting their trust, their brands behind this. The world needs a way to trust, and I think Hedera implements that. The one question that I think a lot of people have is, well, how does it actually enable that in terms of scale? It's doing all these wonderful and amazing use cases. How can it possibly scale? I know you've got an answer for this, to achieve all of this. How can it tackle the evolution of money through stable coins, to act as a trust layer and a watchdog in regards to AI, and to enable kind of safe AI, to build up the carbon credit market, to do all of these amazing things? How can it do all of that?
Well, I mean, the scale comes in different factors. So you could scale, you can physically scale the network so that through the number of nodes, and we have a path to decentralization, which was laid down right at the beginning by the founders, which has the governing council hosting the first set of nodes, and then a community nodes, which was, I think, a term we're not using anymore, but the still a permission network, but the next phase, and then that grows, and then we've got the ability to do sharding. And so sharding enables us to maintain this. We're achieving settlement finality within 3 seconds at the moment. That's actual legal settlement finality within 3 seconds, not probabilistic, not we might roll back in 95% or 5% of the time. So that's the way we scale. I mean, we vertically scale significantly. We've got throttles set on each of the services, and we're still well within the headroom at the moment. You'll remember that we had a use case with Atma.io, which was pushing thousands and thousands of transactions a second. They couldn't find product market fit for the cost of that use case, but technically we were able to demonstrate that we could push, I think it was 5,000 or 6,000, well within our throttle, which is 10,000, and theoretically far higher, 50, 60,000 or whatever per shard. Remember, so we've got time, and I get questions. I do this AMA every week on Brandon's show.
Shout out to Brandon.
And the question I get every single week is, when is the TPS coming back, or when is it going up, and what do we need to do? And every week I say, well, we don't really want the one use case that does the 10,000. What we want is 10 use cases that do 1,000 each, or 100 use cases that do 100 each, right? Because that shows network adoption, and we're getting adoption. We've got, as we keep saying, we've got all of these amazing use cases, but they're not high volume TPS use cases. They're, great news that we haven't even talked about, the Archax Lloyd's news just from last week as well. along with the Kraken and Robinhood news, it's just they come thick and fast. But if it's a high value, low volume use case, then it's not going to hit the TPS network. So what we want to look at is the TVL network or the real world asset platforms. So lots of metrics that we need to look at. But we're confident that the network itself will scale horizontally and vertically in any way we need to, long before the utility and the growth of the network hits it. There are no red flags in that whatsoever, like there are on some networks. Purport to be super high scale, but you push them a bit hard and they'll fall over really, in a very fragile way.
Yeah, and if we're looking
Hedera
to
is anti-fragile.
Yeah, if we're looking to kind of implement this global way to trust and to enable all of this, I mean, not only the technology and the unlock there. Again, it takes us from routing emails through the post office service for the kind of financial world to just sending emails, sending money, and being able to do and conduct business like that. But more broadly than that, it can give the world trust. And if it's going to do that, it needs to be able to. And I think Hedera, that's one thing that's always stuck out for me, is that it was very well thought out. A lot of blockchains and distributed ledgers just ran to market and then said, we'll figure it out as we go. Whereas Hedera, somebody sat and thought about all of these problems that many of these projects are now facing and solved them. I mean, even if you look at Byzantine fault tolerance, the Federal Reserve released a paper on how actually these systems or the system of the future need to have that. Hedera has that. It's just so... It's unbelievable.
Well, it's
really,
better than that. It's better than Byzantine fault tolerance. Is asynchronous Byzantine fault tolerance. It's the gold standard of decentralized network security. So that you just don't get better than
that. And that's of course important when we're talking about quantum computers and things like this, right? Yeah, because I think the theory is that these quantum computers, there's a standard, and it escapes me that most blockchains are. And even distributed ledgers are kind of capable of handling. And once we go above that with quantum computers, you could kind of break these chains. Well, Hedera, I mean, it's Byzantine fault tolerant, asynchronous Byzantine fault tolerant. It escapes that.
Yeah, and the cryptographic standards that the chains use are the things, the code that the quantum computers will break. There's a couple of very good papers that Lehman Beds put out that demonstrate how Hedera would remain secure under those conditions, and that we don't have very much to worry about at all.
Wow, it's an amazing time to be in the crypto space. It's an amazing time to be interested in Hedera. Rob, we've got how many months left to the year? 5 months left till the end of the year. What do you think people should look out for? Are there things you're kind of looking out for or expecting? I know you're not going to be able to talk about everything, of course, but what do you think people should look out for from now until the end of the year? I think it's going to be a pretty explosive run up to the end of the year and then future, but what are you looking out for?
Oh, well, I'm looking out for my own projects.
Of course.
I have to say that. I mean, and I can't say anything that is speculative whatsoever. But I think for anyone who wants to join the dots, anyone who wants to look at the sequence of announcements that have come out this year. So Charles Adkins took over the foundation in January on a remit to set up Hedera 2.0. And I think he's done an amazing job. His team, his leadership team, have been, really killing it. I mean, they're kicking all the goals, and these sorts of announcements, like we've had with Robinhood and Kraken and all the others we've been talking about, are their hard work in the background. And on top of that, every single announcement that we see come out is based not just on the foundation. We've got the association, we've got Hashgraph, working on the hash spheres as well as the core engineering, and the governing council is doing a great job self-governing as well for the network. So all of these ingredients are really working well. I mean, it's taken a while and tweaks, and we've got to course correct a little bit. And last year was a case in point, but we came through that, and I'm really very, very optimistic that the next 6 months and 12 months and beyond, whatever happens in the markets, I'm largely, and I know you're fascinated and focused, but I'm really focused on the use cases, because it's the utility of the network that I think really carries it through and will continue to carry it through, not through one cycle or two, but for this 100-year journey that we're on, and the quality will come through. So the next 5-6 months, we've got strong tailwinds out of the US now. Once we get the market structure bill through, and we've seen Genius and all of that is coming together, that's a massive tailwind for the entire industry. It'll be great to see what happens in the other jurisdictions that either follow suit or need to deal with it. The stablecoin wave that's going to come out of the US is going to be transformative, absolutely transformative. And we're Hedera, for good or ill, is seen as one of the US chains. So I think it's really going to get a bit of a turbo boost from that as well. Our policy team are kicking goals. So Nilmini and Isadora are, and they're the team around them are really contributing both publicly and behind the scenes to a lot of the policy decisions that are being made in most of the key jurisdictions in the world. So I think you need to join the dots and see the announcements, not for point announcements, but for a kind of theme that Hedera is really establishing itself deeply and widely, and the use cases will start flourishing like flowers in a fertile field.
Amen. Rob, it's always an absolute pleasure to connect with you, to have you on, to catch up. We love having you. We hope we can have you back on soon. Thank you very much. Links to this in the description to where you can find Rob and some of the things that we spoke about. Rob, thank you.
Thanks, Rupert. Love being on it. Thanks. Bye.